And yet, you have two very interesting daughters who continue to interact with you in very interesting ways and influence you.
Yeah, we have produced two children who are essentially in the family business, and that is getting doctorates and being university teachers. But Bill's interests have also shaped me. Two of the pieces that I think are two of the most important pieces I've done a lot of writing, but I did in 1981 a piece called Theoretical Underpinnings for Women's Health. And then about a decade later, Bill and I did another piece that was sort of a decade later what we thought theoretically of where women's health was going. And it was really a good joint piece because Bill had the philosophical background to sort of, lots of times in conversations when you have a husband who's a philosopher, you think you have this great insight. You're just really excited to sort of present it at the dinner table. And he says, yes, Plato said that. and didn't you read that? Well, no, I really did not read it. Or, Kant made the same point. Or Husserl really had that in mind when he said. And so I have been disappointed from time to time that some of my thoughts were not original. But with his background in mind, it did enable me, as we would talk about things. We have done, several things that we've written together because the real life need to somehow have some sort of theoretical underpinnings sort of came from my professional, but then they made sense to him.
Interesting. And what philosophical perspectives did he bring that were particularly helpful to you?
If you know anything about Husserl's phenomenological approach, particularly the idea of bracketing ideas. Technically, Husserl does talk about bracketing, and what bracketing means in that system is you take something that is either commonplace or long-standing, an idea. Take, for example, the way nursing homes are constructed. And you are going to think creatively about the subject. You're going to think new thoughts. And what you do is rather neutrally bracket the ideas. Say, I'm just going to hold them in abeyance. I am not going to make any presupposition about right or wrong, or that it always has to be that way. And then basically it is sort of looking at the phenomenon as much as you can in a fresh way. And I think that that is an enormously creative way of looking at things. And particularly, I know when we did the session yesterday on orchestrating a career, and we wound up, the comment was made that someone had really had a hard time moving to do research in nursing homes because it was seen to be a dead-end area. I remarked at the time that I think whenever you feel a passion and other people think they don't get it, they think where you're going is nowhere, actually this can be a creative moment. I mean, I think it's almost a time where you take it more seriously, that your thinking is a little to the side, that you've never read anything that quite captured the way you believe things should be. And I think really this Husserlian notion of sort of taking what is in abeyance and then maybe taking your thoughts about how it could be different and really being more serious about that, being playful with it. I think playful is a really good word where you have to, for me that has often been then doing like a stream of consciousness of ideas. Over time I have come to have more confidence that when I think something is connected, suppose I think 3 things are connected. Nobody else quite thinks those 3 things are connected, but I do. I find that if I just write what I think the connection is and not push it, this is not a neat essay. Frequently as I go through things, particularly over time, because I think anything big, you don't just think once, you keep chewing on it. Frequently I begin to see the threads of connection. And actually that's where a good spouse, good partner, good friends help, because sometimes Bill and I do monologues at each other. And we comment. But I find that really just talking out, and with a few comments like Plato thought of that, you then get your ideas out in a safe way, and you begin to see the threads of connection. And I'm not saying for all ideas, but really for the ones that somehow you keep thinking there's something there. Staying with it and then having some confidence that what you would put together might be fresh, it might be creative, it might be innovative.
Interesting. Thank you. Angela has had a lot of what I would call leadership positions, roles. And, but you make the argument that leadership is not really a role. You can be a leader without the...
It's not administration.
Right. And, however, I'd like you to think about the roles that you've had and why you decided to accept them and how you thought about preparing yourself for them. And the kinds of roles that Angela has had, she's dean of the largest nursing school, multi-campus nursing school in the country. She was president of most of the major nursing organizations at one time or another.
Only 2.
And you're the chair of now the Scholars Program with RWJ.
Right.
So if you could...
And I am the director of the Leadership Program for the Building Academic Geriatric Nursing Capacity, which I am enormously proud of.
There you go.
How did I get in?
Why did you accept them? How did you choose to accept a particular role? And then how did you think about preparing for it?
One of the other things that was very important to my development, I talked about going to Yale, and that really takes us from 62 to 73. And it was around then that my husband took a job in the Midwest and I moved to the Midwest. And when I moved, I knew I needed to get a doctorate because it was clear if you were going to stay in academia in nursing, you really needed good research training. And I didn't go into clinical psychology because I didn't need clinical skills. What I needed was research training. So I went on for that. And then my first position, my position afterwards, was Indiana University was just starting their doctoral program. I joined the faculty in '78, and that's when the first students matriculated. And they had already had an NIMH grant to develop a doctoral program in psych mental health nursing. And so that's '78. Meanwhile, and again, my husband, in 1980, one of his colleagues, a woman who was very much into American philosophy, the Kellogg Foundation had celebrated the 50th anniversary of their foundation by creating what they thought at the time would be a one-shot leadership development program. It was 3 years. You had to do a project, so you got money for a project. It paid for 25% of your time to work on this project. And then it had leadership development conferences 2 a year. They were week-long. But the whole program was interdisciplinary. Anyway, his colleague got one of these, and I thought it was one of the greatest things that had ever happened, and found out that what they were doing once they decided that they would start this leadership program. So I was in the second cohort of this leadership program, and I was the only nurse in it. It was, there were 40 Kellogg Fellows. 31 of them were men, 9 were women, and I was the only woman who was traditional, meaning still married to the original husband and having children, which gave me a very interesting role within this group. But over the course, Kellogg had very definite notions of leadership development. They really believed that leadership in the future had to be interdisciplinary. That is, leadership wasn't going to belong to any one field. And so they would have conferences, like we went to MIT for a week to do a week-long conference on information technology. And if you think about this is still the early 80s. They gave us a computer. My first computer was a Kellogg gift. Does anybody remember an Osborne? It looked like a sewing machine. It was that big. And my 8-year-old at the time did show me, no, she was, I guess, 10 or 11 at the time, how to actually, thank God for her. I kept saying, don't open the box. She opened the box. Don't set it up. And then she set it up. And then by the third time it was, Kara, can you show me how to use this? So for several years, Kara and I belonged to the HOG, the Hoosier Osborne group. And I would tell her my question, and we would go, and she was the youngest person. Then she would communicate back to me about what was going on.